Good afternoon, everyone. I do not have a,
Sorry.
yeah, I don't have an agenda in front of me.
We have no agenda.
Yeah,
Oh, we don't.
yeah, there's no agenda. We don't have any agendas, you know. Welcome to this meeting of the Gainesville City, welcome to this meeting of the, this workshop for the Gainesville City Commission for June 2nd.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor.
It's all right, Madam Clerk.
We have the adoption of the agenda. So moved.
A motion and a second. I see no lights. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously with Commissioner Duncan Walker absent. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, we have our discussion item for the afternoon, 2026-318 fiscal year 2027 budget development with the recommendation the City Commission hear the presentation from staff and provide direction as needed.
All right, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the final budget workshop of this series. We'll be talking about the GCRA, HCD, Sustainable Development, Transportation, and Non-Departmental and Wild Spaces, and we'll be updating you on role information, which we've received now, as well as where the gap stands as we go into our next discussions, which will be fire assessment resolution on June 18th, and then City Commission setting the tentative millage on July 16th. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Teslia.
Okay. Good afternoon. For the record, Allison Teslia, the Director for the Office of Management and Budget. And today we're here for the final departmental budget presentation for fiscal year 2027. Here's a recap of how we've gotten to where we are today and where we're continuing to go. All right, so let's do a little recap. Okay, first up, this is a recap of the fiscal year 2027 estimates for the 17 general fund budgets that we have presented so far to date in the May budget workshops and where those all landed. Okay, as of May 28th, the general fund budget gap between projected revenues and expenses was approximately 11.9 million. This slide provides a breakdown of how the gap changed from the fiscal retreat in March based on the departments that were presented to date. Okay, today we'll be presenting the 2027 budget estimates for the Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area, Housing and Community Development, Non-Departmental, Sustainable Development, Transportation, and Wild Spaces Public Places. We will be reviewing each department's fiscal year 2027 budget estimates compared to the 2026 adopted and amended budgets and any proposed changes to their budgets, such as position levels, year-over-year appropriation changes, and any other updates. Okay, so first up, we have the Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area. They're 100% funded from tax increment funds. Core services include providing affordable and workforce housing development, small business and entrepreneur support, job creation and commercial development, downtown and GCRA neighborhood revitalizations, and business and homeowner incentives. And the GCRA supports 3 of the city's strategic priorities. Sorry, my pages don't want to turn. All right. There we go. The fiscal year 2027 budget estimate for the GCRA is approximately $450,000 or 6.6% less than the fiscal year 2026 adopted. Under personal services, it reflects the elimination of 3 project managers. It includes proposed wage adjustments and increases to the employer portion of the health insurance costs. Under operating expenditures, it reflects a reduction of $3.5 million, which is a reduction in operating costs based on the fiscal year 2026 actuals, the reallocation of certain programs from the operating category to grants and aid, and non-reoccurring expenses that were only in fiscal year 2026. Under capital outlay, there's an increase of $3.5 million, which is funding that's being provided for the GTEC capital improvements and the Citizens Field and MLK property revitalization projects. So the fiscal year 2027 estimate for GCRA is approximately $6.3 million, reflecting a 6.6 reduction from the fiscal year 2026 budget. I'll stop for any questions.
All right, I don't see any lights, so.
All right. Next up, we have Housing and Community Development. The department is primarily funded by grant funds. 69.2% of the department's budget is allocated to operating related costs. Their core services, they assist with affordable housing development and home rehabs, home ownership and housing stabilization assistance, neighborhood revitalization, providing assistance to seniors and at-risk youth, and job training and employment opportunities. The department supports 2 of the city's strategic priorities. And their fiscal year 2027 budget estimate for the general fund is approximately $46.5 thousand, or 8.8% more than the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. Under personal services, it reflects proposed wage adjustments and increases to employer health insurance costs, and the general fund increase is reflecting the reallocation of the HCD manager. That position was previously funded from ARPA, and now it's going to general fund and some of the other funds. It's being split up the allocation. Under operating expenditures, it reflects an increase for the insurance premiums in the general fund, and in the other funds, the operating expenditures are based on anticipated funding availability, and it also includes the reallocation of certain assistance costs that are being recognized as grants and aids. So you'll see that just move down into the other category. So for fiscal year 2027, the estimate for HCD is approximately $3.7 million, reflecting a 2.4% increase over the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget.
I see no lights.
All right, next we have the Department of Sustainable Development. The department is primarily funded by the Building Code Fund and the General Fund. 76.1% of the department's budget is allocated to personnel-related costs. Some of the department's core services include being responsible for the development and implementation of the comp plan, ensuring safe and organized planning and development, and city code compliance and enforcement. The department supports all of the city's strategic priorities. Their fiscal year 2027 budget estimate for the general fund is approximately $3,000, or 0.1% more than the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. This is a reflection of proposed wage adjustments, updated payroll allocations between the funds based on the duties that are being performed, increases to the employer portion of health insurance costs, with the general fund decrease reflecting the reallocation of the chief resiliency officer to the city manager's office. The increase in other funds reflects the additional fire protection technician that was approved during the current fiscal year, and a request for a new permit expediter position in fiscal year 2027. Under operating expenditures, it reflects an increase for the insurance premiums and fleet-related costs for fuel maintenance and replacements. The fiscal year 2027 estimate for sustainable development is approximately $8.2 million, reflecting a 5.7% increase over the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget.
Pause here for a moment. Commissioner Book.
Thank you. So in our third of the several departments we're doing well here. Just some additional explanation on the FTEs. I know that we have the information on the slide, but the fire protection technician, what they do. And I would assume, Mr. Manager, that the permit expediter position might be related to some state statutory guidance that deals with the manner in which we do processes. But so just some more context on those would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the fire protection technician and the permit expediter position, those are both funded through the building fund. So they're not a general fund expenditure. The fire protection technician, this is, we have 2 positions in the department that essentially review all development plans, building permits for compliance with the Florida Fire Protection Code. So it's a compliance position that is embedded in the building department and works directly with Gainesville Fire Rescue as well. The permit expediter position, that's what we call our front desk staff. So they're the ones that process permits, take in phone calls, do all of the intake for the thousands of building permits that we process every year.
How are we handling that now?
We have a variety of it's an existing position that we have, I think, 4 or 5 existing permit expediters, and they we rotate through folks as they come and go.
Thank you, Direct. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Go ahead.
All right, next up, we have the Transportation Department. The Transportation Department is funded from multiple funding sources that are based on their function. Some examples, the transit services are primarily funded from grants and charges for services. Parking operations are funded out of the general fund and supported by parking fees. And fleet management is an internal service provider who charges for their services. And also something to note is that 75% of the department's budget is just for the regional transit system. And the department supports 3 of the city's strategic priorities. The fiscal year 2027 budget estimate for the general fund is approximately $297,000 or 21.3% more than the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. Overall, the personal services for all the funds reflect proposed wage adjustments and increases for the employer portion of health insurance. The RTS fund includes a request for additional personnel for the ADA and community transportation program. That includes 9 new transit operators, 1 assistant transit operations manager, 1 customer support specialist, and then it would be reduced by the elimination of a fleet maintenance supervisor and a transit planning manager position. In the operating expenditures, the general fund reflects the general insurance premium and increases for contractual services, merchant fees, maintenance, computer software costs, and a one-time $83,000 for repairs and maintenance related to the Southwest parking garage. And then in the other funds, it reflects increases for insurance premiums, fleet, fuel, and maintenance. Under capital expenditures, this reflects estimated capital expenses that would be directly related to the 2027 FTA Super Grant. And then the overall budget for transportation is $42.7 million and is a 14.3% increase over the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. Any questions?
I see the lights.
All right. Next, we'll talk about non-departmental. This is where we recognize citywide costs such as debt service, interfund transfers, contingency reserves, the retiree health, and citywide insurance and risk allocations. And this supports all of the city's strategic priorities. All right, the general fund estimate for fiscal year 2027 is $1.5 million or 4.9% more than the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. The major changes to the general fund includes a 4% estimated increase for the combined communication center and a contingency for estimated increases for the pension contributions, and it maintains funding for outside agencies and special events. In the other funds, it reflects increases for personal services within the pension funds for retiree benefits and increased costs for insurance and operating costs. The $30,000 under capital reflects the replacement of a motor pool vehicle that's shared throughout the city. In debt service and transfers, it reflects increases which are primarily due to the new debt payments for the new debt that was incurred in the current fiscal year for infrastructure projects that we have. The overall budget for non-departmental is $174.3 million and is a 14.9% increase over the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget.
Commissioner Book.
I had to absorb the information on the non-departmental first because there's so many different areas there. When you look at kind of our budget updates and where we're maintaining funding, which is several organizations, all extremely valuable, all extremely meaningful. I wonder, just a couple of them, and this is really just food for thought, is Grace Marketplace. We basically turned over land, geography, to them, which will allow them to leverage monies their future and get additional funding sources from other places. So this is something for us to at least consider. I know that gets very touchy, and people get very, very concerned when they hear that. But we are funding them by millions. And the whole point of turning over the land was to allow them the opportunity to get monies from other sources. And maybe something for us to look at. We have a conversation with Grace to see how they're doing there. That's just one point. The other one is the fare free program. I wonder if that's impacted at all by what the school board is doing and the manner in which they're changing schools. Would that potentially mean less or more youth are potentially using our RTS service at no dollar? So I don't know the way to really analyze those things, but they're important because they're services we're providing and things that we've done in the past. So just two comments for the manager and for you, Director.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And last but not least, we have Wild Spaces and Public Places, which is primarily funded through the voter-approved sales tax, and they're dedicated to conservation, parks, and recreational projects across the city. The general fund budget has no changes for fiscal year 2026 because it's a very minimal operating costs that are recognized in the general fund. In the Wild Spaces Public Places funds, the personnel expenses reflects the addition of 2 FTEs in fiscal year 2026 and the reallocation of a temporary position to operating. It also includes proposed wage adjustments and increases for the employer portion of health insurance costs. Under operating, there's an increase for fleet-related costs, travel and training for staff with professional certifications, and the reallocation of the temporary position to contractual services. Under capital, it reflects the purchase of a new vehicle and new funding for various projects in 2027. The overall budget for Wild Spaces Public Places is $9.7 million and is about a 10.1% decrease from the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. For any questions? All right. So, overview of the general fund. Stuck together today. All right. So, this is the initial revenue estimates that we provided during the fiscal retreat back in March. At that point, the estimated revenues were approximately $2.8 million or 1.7% more than the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. And we were looking at an estimated $164.8 million in revenue for the general fund. All right, so since our last meeting, we received the estimated property values from the property appraiser's office, which came in at about a 3% increase. Initially, we had an estimate of 5%. So that reflected a reduction in the revenue that we were estimating. And that's really the only change that we've had. So we're currently looking at $163.3 million in total revenue for the general fund. We still have quite a few outstanding items, including the updated government services contribution, which we expect at the end of June. The indirect cost allocation study, which is also expected at the end of June. The updated contribution requirements for the general employee pension plan have not been finalized. We'll also receive the certified taxable values on July 1st, and then the state revenue sharing estimates usually come in towards the end of July and beginning of August. Okay, so this is a breakdown of all the expenditure changes to the general fund that have been presented since the fiscal retreat. Total adjustments include the general insurance costs, which is $3.1 million. The fleet fixed costs, which is $922,000. Estimated fuel cost estimates were an increase of $123,000. The fleet variable costs for repairs and maintenance was about $494,000. And then the overall departmental budget changes were a reduction of $1.68 million. So the overall changes since the fiscal retreat equate to an increase of $2.99 million, bringing the total expenditures to $175.3 million. All right, so this is a summary of all the changes of the revenues and expenses from the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget to today's fiscal year 2027 estimates. As I mentioned, for the March fiscal retreat, we used a 5% growth assumption for property values, which were reduced based on the preliminary values we received, since the property appraiser's evaluation was only a 3% increase. We are reducing out the fiscal year one-time fund balance allocation from 2026. And then the other revenue adjustments bring us to an increase of about 1.2 million over the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. Under expenditures, we had an overall increase of 4.8 million for personal services, $1.3 million estimate for increased pension contribution requirements, 3.1 million for general insurance, 1.5 million for fleet-related costs, 2.5 million for other operating costs, $166,000 increase for debt service, and a $215,000 reduction in transfers to other funds, bringing us to an overall increase of 13.3 million in expenditures. Between the two, it creates a projected deficit of about 12 million. All right. And then this is just a general summary of the gap from the fiscal retreat to now, with the initial general fund estimates and then all of the department budgets and the changes between the two to where we are with the revised gap today. Right. So over the next couple weeks, we're going to be fine-tuning the fiscal year 2027 budget adjustments as we receive the outstanding budget items. And we'll be meeting with departments to make any adjustments that we can prior to the maximum millage presentation in July. So that's the end of my presentation, but we are open to all the questions.
Commissioner Eastman.
Okay, so is this the list of what we tentatively have scheduled for the rest of our budget meetings as well? Like we have that in July 16th, obviously we'll set the millage rate. And then are we planning on having any more discussions? I mean, right now we have a $12 million budget gap here, right? So we're hearing from all this, things are moving rapidly. We just got our preliminary numbers, but I mean, how do we think, what is the process moving forward?
So our next discussion will actually be on June 18th, which will be where you set the preliminary fire assessment.
Right.
I think if the commission was interested in having another, discussion with all of you, I'm sure we could make that work. Our intent was to meet with departments, get a decrement list, and then meet with you individually ahead of the July 16th meeting as we bring balancing scenarios forward.
Okay, and so the July 16th meeting is when we would we would come up with balancing scenarios?
Yes, that is our intent.
Whether we want to balance out that, I mean, but also the fire assessment will be a central part of that as
Correct.
well. But where we have to basically decide how much we're going to take in revenues vis-a-vis cuts at that point.
Exactly.
Okay, I would like to meet with you guys, I mean, ahead of that. I see all these, I hear, all of this seems reasonable to, well, right now it seems, I mean, there's a huge gap there, right? But just getting a little more background as to what those, what kind of cuts we could look at, how we can make sure that we're getting into a balanced area, because, I mean, we're still looking at a $12 million gap here.
Similar to, I think, what we did in FY24, if you all remember, we met with you in pretty intensive, long sessions to talk about balancing scenarios, answer questions, and to be able to get y'all's feedback as we go forward on all the levers, cuts, and revenues.
Yeah. No, all right, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. And my experience has consistently been that you all will meet with each of us individually as many times as we need to meet.
Correct.
To get the information that we need to be ready to make decisions on July 16th.
Correct.
Commissioner Willits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we go back to transportation?
Sure.
I just have a question about the other funds. Some of this is capital outlay, so there are grants and whatnot, but I'm just wondering a big chunk is still personnel and operating. Where does that extra revenue come from I want a little more understanding of the revenue into that's going to provide for some of these increased spending. I understand capital is probably very much like a grant. I'm imagining that, but the other items.
So a good portion of the RTS, which is their total budget, is just over $12 million just for personnel. When you add the salaries and benefits, it is probably about 16.5 million of that $27 million budget for RTS itself, and that is primarily grant funded. So that's a big chunk of what's here.
Right, and I know we're mostly talking about general, but I just need some real numbers on the revenue because this is one of those departments that so much of it is not in general revenue, which largely we're talking about the levers for general revenue. I just want to understand what the revenues are looking like. And I know there's different chunks of that, but can someone like tell us what the next year is going to look like, or does this represent spending down balance that RTS has access to?
Do you want to speak on your grants?
I mean, it's not a bunch of it's not a bunch of new fair revenue or UF providing cash. So I need some answers.
Mayor, Commissioners, Jesus Gomez, the Transportation Department. Yeah, there are some areas that we want to increase revenue, and one of those ideas that being the Community Transportation Coordinator. So we believe that providing that service, we can generate additional funding. That's where you see the positions that we're including as adding those positions. Let me see on the. Also, we have other options, but we haven't talked to the city manager yet on the potential new revenues. So that's something that we need to discuss. Increasing fares an option. That we haven't had any increase in fares since 2009. So that's an option to address that. Let's see what else we included on this budget. Yeah, we've been lucky on the bus lease agreements. We initially said that we're gonna have I guess a 750 in revenue, and now we're close to $1 million that we have for next year's budget. So it's additional revenue we're using by leasing those 33 buses we have.
Oh, so we still have more leasing
Yes.
ability. Okay.
And we're looking at opportunity to offer that to other agencies too, to continue that.
Right. Thank you. That helps me understand some of the possibility.
Yeah.
Anything else that stands out or we should know about?
Not that we haven't discussed with the city manager yet, but there's some ideas.
Okay. Well, Mr. Manager, I'd like to know a little more about the revenue.
We'll definitely get into that.
Because like this is just one where you're like, what do you mean $5 million extra dollars? Some of it I understand is like grants that we have been afforded. They are going to roll through, particularly capital, but when it comes to personnel and operating, that's less so grant than these other sources.
Yeah, the other thing that is including in here is that we eliminating the second shift because we're reducing service so much that we can do the service with 2 shifts on the maintenance side. So we are reducing some of the positions for that. So that's operating savings.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Manager.
you, Commissioner Willetts. I see any further lights. So, Commissioner Book.
Thank you. I just want to be concise with the comments, but there's so much here. So as of today, 11.94 million or 12.01 million? Where are we at?
It's 12.
All right, so essentially a $12 million gap. We've heard the departments, and obviously, Mr. Manager will be going over what are the various levers, how do we do it? I would just, from the dais, my perspective is that we always start with external funding. So we have to fund internally first. We have to fund our staff, our operations, our divisions, our personnel. So the non-departmental side, this is just a comment, has some extremely valuable organizations that we've funded for years. I know that previous city manager sent a letter during our budget session about 24 months ago, maybe 36 months ago, and all it said was prepare for potential cuts, and may have even put in a figure like, and figure out your budget at 50% of what the city's funding. So looking just on that particular slide and the external funding agencies, If we have $12 million gap, we have to start with the external funds that are going outside the city, even though we know they're doing great work. Every one of them, and in my very inexpert opinion, that's probably about $500,000 on the non-departmental side. Just doing some quick math, that's something you all have to think. So you may want to consider at least providing some notice to these external funding partners of what we're doing today. That's all. Give them a realistic picture of what we're facing so that they may end up with contingencies for themselves should it come down to that. The second part I was thinking, I mentioned decrement packages, and I don't like them. I've been through those exercises. They're horrible, and they're across the board. But for the charters, if doing quick, very rough math, an 8% decrement is $13 million, roughly. And a 7% decrement is really $11.5 million. So in those areas is what we're looking at. And I recognize while all departments are important, not every department may be equal. So that's really for charters to figure out. But the best experts in the room are going to be the divisions. Where can they cut back? It's not going to be up here from the 7 of us. We have examples, but we don't know operationally what's happening day to day. So from my standpoint, I would hope that the charters would get together as just a comment, not a motion, and be thinking, if you were in a terrible situation of 7 to 8%, and it's a lot, what that might look like, and be prepared to have those conversations with the various charter officers. So that's just me. And that gets you to $12 million, and it's very, very painful. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Willetts.
I'll just say that the 12 million is oddly close to a scenario that the governor has proposed we would suddenly be under. I think, I don't know what got the amendment yesterday. I'm still confused by what exactly got amended, particularly in the realm of libraries and children's trust. I'm still confused. Everything I've read, I'm still confused. But the 12 million, it's not a bad idea, Commissioner Book, to look at that as a number because, or a percentage, 8%. If not just because that's already what the governor is proposing a city like us would have to do anyway. So I think it is worth, I don't want to send staff on wild goose chases for something that might not happen at the ballot box, but knowing that those numbers are so similar, it's probably a very valid use of time, A, for this fiscal year, but also going forward. Because that level's more like, we say decrement, but this goes back to 2023, FY24, I guess. This is restructuring. This is not something I don't think this is something you can decrement your way out of. I think this is, if we were just to say the 12 million, right? No new revenue. It's more about, restructuring things because you're going to have to find real savings or real chunks of services that the city's just no longer going to provide. So I think it's probably useful, use of our time. If it was just this year, if the legislature hadn't, I would prefer to us to start coming up with fire assessment increase and millage increase to not waste staff time freaking people out, but knowing that this is probably a good process. And Mr. Manager, can you remind me, we set preliminary, or we instructed you to bring back preliminary fire assessment at 70% recovery, which is at 53 now. All right. Doing some quick math in my head, or you can tell me.
Well, I was going to say, in terms of what the value is of that.
Between the 53 to the 70%.
So, from recollection, at 70%, it's an additional $4 million of revenue. At 85%, it's an additional $7 million of revenue. If it's if it's of interest, I think we can bring all that information to the meeting on the 16th or 18th, so you all have that in case since this is a very dynamic budget year, we'll be able to bring that information to you all, so you can make a decision on the 18th.
Right, and just even though it's only 2 weeks away, as we talk to the community, those numbers need to, I think, be in our heads of some of the levers. Thank you for including the millage chart so that we can also,
Yes.
but also other people, as they start to brainstorm. I think people think there's magic cuts. I've seen the budget. There's not magic cuts to get to 12 million. but we do have some levers here, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Willetts. Commissioner Eastman.
Commissioner Wilson, just on the on what passed today, that it's about a $9 million revenue loss, it seems like, in the next, that would begin actually 3 months into our fiscal year. So it starts January 1st, 2027. And so whatever we're talking about here is what we're going to have. I mean, that will hit us right in the middle of all of this. And so if my understanding is correct.
And Ms. Ramos may want to clarify, because we were just talking about this, so that was my read of it as well, but I don't believe it would hit in January. It wouldn't be until the next tax year.
Okay.
But I will say this maybe generally about the legislation. There's still a lot of questions that we have, and I think to Commissioner Willett's point about the legislation is more than just a number we're trying to hit. It also comes with the restructuring of how we can spend ad valorem revenue, which is more of a restructure than I think we've experienced, even with our budget cuts that we've had in the last several years.
So based on the information that we have, our understanding is that it will affect the property values for January 1st. So it wouldn't necessarily affect the 2027 budget. It would really be what we're preparing for the fiscal year 2028. Because right now, the property values that we just got last week are based on January 1st of 2026. So that's when you would see it. You know, there's kind of like a delay before we get those values. So that's the way we're understanding it right now. And as the manager said, there's still a lot of questions.
Okay.
Clarification
All right, that
needed.
makes sense. That's more for the appraiser and what the appraisal time period is for that. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to look at, you know, all of it. I think, you know, we are looking at potential, you know, we are consistently here. We have more expenditures than we have revenue coming in, and we are now at 3% total growth on the rolls. That's not going to change anytime soon. It doesn't seem to me. We might have more construction that is coming in, but we just need to make sure that our ongoing expenditures are matching what we have in revenues. We've seen tremendous increase in you know, police and fire salaries in recent years. Not necessarily hiring of new ones, but making sure that we could recruit. I don't know what. There's not much you can do about that except, you know, those two. I think we need to look at where our budgets have increased in recent years and see what kind of efficiencies we could find there, and finding efficiencies across the board. Looking at more revenue changes. We've talked before about getting more sponsorships for things like our Free Fridays festival, for our New Year's events that people really go to. We've talked about signs and bus stop advertising and seeing what we can do with that. I know these are more long-term type questions than what we probably will figure out before you know, October 1st rolls around. But I mean, knowing what is coming up in this particular year and knowing what's coming up next year, I think, yeah, we need to take out our pencils and get all this stuff sorted out. So I look forward to sitting down and figuring out what we can do for July as a commission. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Let me say also, because it needs to be said, two things. First of all, I do not accept as a foregone conclusion that what the legislature passed becomes law. What they passed becomes law, but that doesn't mean it becomes part of the Constitution. We have an opportunity to affect that. I intend to work very hard to affect that. But the bigger elephant in the room that has been in the room for so long that we've forgotten that it's here, so I want to remind us, that $12 million number, when you add that to the existing general services contribution, that's about what the formula would bring us. The gap is the difference between the formula and the random number that has been chosen. And it's important to say that. And that may offend some folks, but that's the reality. If the general services contribution followed the formula, we would essentially not be in a gap. I see the elephant in the room, and I'm not going to let anybody else not see it. So. Commissioner.
For the public, when you say general services transfer, you're talking about things
From the
we're reaching?
utilities.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
that needs to be clear.
Yes.
Utilities. All right, I think while I have to, we're talking about a lot of restructuring, which the potential of restructuring, but we won't really know whether or not we have to do that until November. So I think it's going to be very, very important that we inform the public of the true impact of all of this. If we're going to have to look at cutting again in January because the property tax will go down again, the 150,000,
No, that will affect.
that will come in November of,
So the way it works is the property values that we collect on are based on January 1st at the beginning of the year. So it will affect next year's budget preparation. Like when we're preparing for fiscal year 2028, that's when we're going to see the true effects of if this gets passed.
okay, that's the 150. When will we see the true effects of the 250?
The 250 would be the following year.
Which is 29, are you saying?
I think that would,
I think if you could use years, that would help.
I think it would be the preparation for fiscal year 2029's budget.
Uh-huh.
And for projections that I think that you all received from the property appraiser for that $150,000 exemption, it's roughly a little bit like $9 and some change, $9 million and change, and then for the 250, it's $12.6 million. That's as it stood prior to the final bill, but yeah, which I know there are some changes to the final bill.
All right, so I don't know if you have any information, but initially, the legislation, our proposed legislation, would cover just fire and police services. Now, are they going to cover constitutional officers? Are we in that anywhere? Are municipal services in that coverage anywhere?
Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest would be maybe this could be something that we either discuss at your meeting on Thursday or perhaps at the next general policy. We I think to all of the points about messaging, we do have a number of materials that we prepared about showing impacts. We've just been waiting to finalize that until the actual bill passed both houses. So now that we have that, we'll be able to finalize that information and be able to include that perhaps in your backup for discussion, and obviously share that with the commission and to the public, to the extent that we can under law.
Oh, okay, all right, to the extent that you can under law.
Right. I mean, meaning that we cannot advocate.
You can
we
just
can
educate.
share information, correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, I hope that's what we're going to take up on at the next meeting.
To Madam Clerk,
Do we have
at our general policy meeting next week, do we have anything on that agenda yet?
Not yet.
Why don't we make that
Okay,
the meeting?
that
Sounds good.
Because by that time, we will have some legal analysis, both from the League of Cities as well as our attorney's office, and we will have had some time to digest the realities of it, as opposed, because 2 days from now, we're still going to be guessing at a few things. That is not the case a week from now. We'll have a much better understanding. So if we just make that the item that we discuss on the general policy meeting next Thursday, we'll be able to have a much better understanding, I think.
all right. And then, looking at the fire assessment, if we raise the fire assessment up, I think I wrote this down to, I think at 60% is 1.7 million. Whatever we raise the fire assessment to can only be used for fire services.
Correct.
And I think that is the key issue for me.
That's correct. And when we come back to you on the
Okay.
18th, we can also give some averages about, what it'll, how it'll affect an average home in Gainesville in terms of the fire assessment cost.
So, I don't know if there are any other services that we can really assess. I would like to see what an increase in fares would look like for RTS when you meet with each one of us. I didn't realize we hadn't raised them since 2009. And then I'd like to see who really uses the youth fair, and we have an exemption also for seniors, correct? Let's just see how those fares are utilized. Do we have any more information, or have we heard from GRU yet as to whether or not the solid waste assessment?
They have not responded to
They have
all
not
that, so,
responded,
yeah.
okay. Whether or not that would, whether or not they were gonna put that on the utility bill. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Eastman.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to speak to the property tax bill, but I think that makes sense. We learned about it minutes before walking up to the dais, and so I don't want to say anything until we're positive about it. I will say that, we've been going through, this is our third year of austerity. We've raised taxes to make up for the loss of the revenue. We've also cut a number of positions. I don't know where we are currently. I know leading up to this, we were at 161.5 positions was cut that first year. Remember from from a report that came out last year that our city has grown lower than the price of inflation has for the South. We have consistently tried to work to find efficiencies within our city government and cut, some real programs that were real services that were going out there and real folks lost their jobs during that time period. It's as we've said for years, this gets harder and harder every year that you have to continue to cut services and try to find doing more with less. At a certain point, you're ended up cutting it even deeper. And so, I think we'll continue to move forward with this, but it just gets, it gets difficult as we move forward. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
Public comment.
Okay. Commissioner Willetts.
When will we see kind of our all funds budget estimate? Again, I know we talked mostly about this, but since, about our total revenue, our total expense projected for the next year.
Cynthia Ramos, Executive Chief of Staff. I think what we may have missed is that we've shown you all the different individual department components individually, so you don't see a roll-up of the all funds, but we can develop a report and share that with you all, so that
Okay.
you can have the big picture view on the general fund and the all fund side. But that's all been drafted individually in the departments that you've seen up through
Got
today.
it. Okay, I figured, just to get a sense of, because there's just a lot of conversation regarding the current legislation about what local governments are doing, of course, they're only coming after, they can say, oh, it's only one revenue stream, but it's the revenue stream that covers, we know what it covers because we look at the budget every year. I don't think the legislature knows what it covers.
Is our largest revenue stream.
It's our largest revenue stream, and it is a whole bunch of stuff that people rely on. And I don't know what the legislature intends, but a city cannot only be firefighters and police officers. It can't. Otherwise, I'd live in the villages. I'm sure they provide fire service and police. I don't want to live in the villages. I want to live in Gainesville. There's got to be something more to a city budget, even general revenue from ad valorem taxes, than police and fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willetts. Commissioner Book.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Woods, I thought that would be helpful to see all the various components of funding, whether it's the proprietary, the fees, grants, et cetera, on there. And the June 11th, taking that up on June 11th for the GPC, I think is really wise. Just like before, I think it would be very helpful. The Chief of Staff did a lot of analyzation the last 3 years. We were able to look at kind of pictorially what's been our general fund and growth, and I think we already have that information. What's been our FTEs and growth or decline? In fact, it's been decline. Our total FTEs today is less than it was that is funded by general fund. That's a fact, so I appreciate you pointing that out. And from my standpoint in overall budgeting, when you have something like this, you put people in front of things and programs and services. So the staff that you have that are doing the work come first. And then you figure out with the staff that you have and what you're doing going forward, how can they do the things that we want? So that's just my thinking as it relates to priorities. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Book. Note that when we talk about about property taxes, ad valorem being the biggest part of our revenue, it's just shy of 50% of our total revenue is property taxes. Our estimate for fiscal 27, $81,349,277 out of projected revenue of $164,829,258. So just shy of 50%. Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you. I think it would be a good idea to follow up on Commissioner Book's suggestion to go on and alert the outside agencies now, prior to June 11th. I think we're going to look back at the budget of 2020, 2021 as the glory days. As we are certainly in a very austere posture now.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to outside agencies, I will be talking to Grace, Marketplace Executive Director, and we're happy to send a letter out to the other agencies that we fund, informing them of our budget. I'm reticent to say we're going to cut it in half if that's not the direction that you all provide today. If we're gonna, I think we did that before and we ended up not doing that. So I want to make sure that if it's just information that, hey, it's a tough budget year, be prepared, that sounds good. But unless you want to say right now, cut their budgets in half, we'll keep it generic at this point.
Yes.
Yep.
Please. Okay, I see no further lights on this. Thank you. Much work to be done. And next Thursday, again at GPC, we'll be discussing very specifically the potential impacts, top to bottom, of the legislature's action today, should that be voted into law by the people in November. Madam Clerk,
Mr. Mayor, we're on to member comment.
any other member comment? Very good. All right, I will see you all. We are adjourned. We'll see you Thursday morning.